All right, everyone. Welcome back to Christian Outdoors Podcast. We have with us once again Mr. Travis Sumner, the keeper of all knowledge regarding the Eastern wild turkey, and he's that may be a stretch, Travis, but one of the most knowledgeable people on the Eastern wild turkey. We've had Travis on just a few episodes ago, and we said then we wanted to have him back and talk about this in a much more detail. And Travis is also with the Mossy Oak Gamekeepers. He's the regional director of that, and a lot of other things that we'll add to in the show notes. Travis, thank you for joining us again. John is here with us again as co-host. So, Travis, thank you for joining us.
Hey, it's my pleasure, guys. I'm really glad to be back with you. Enjoyed our last time together, and it's good to be here. And hope you guys are doing well. Trying to beat this heat, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes, 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 very, very much so. When we're recording this for the listener here in South Carolina, Travis in South Carolina, I am. John's up in upstate New York, but it's into triple digits down here already, and it's going to get worse this week. But we have air conditioning. And for that,
And fans,
it has
ceiling fans.
fans. I got a fan blowing and a ceiling fan blowing on me right here in the air conditioning. So I'm very thankful for that, Travis. As we said, and we were talking a little bit before we started recording about the eastern wild turkey, and it's well documented that the decline in the past decade or so. You're going to give us those dates here, but we're really going to focus on Virginia, Kentucky, Southeast, which seems to be where the greatest impact of the decline of the wild turkey has been. We grew up in the glory days of wild turkeys. We really did, and very fortunate for that. Here in South Carolina, we had a 5 bird limit forever, and it was nothing to go out in the mornings and hear 7, 8, 10 different turkeys gobble. And as we've said before, that is extremely rare now to hear
Mhm.
one or two
Very
birds.
much.
And getting one to want to play with you and communicate is even harder. And I mean, for whew, 12, 15 years, I could easily get my limit on public land. And there were so many birds to go around, and it was awesome growing up during that stage. But now I am extremely worried about the future of the wild turkey in our area. So we brought Travis on here to talk about it. So Travis, tell us what's going on, man.
Well, I appreciate that introduction. I do. I was just sitting here thinking when you mentioned that how long um, I've been at it, is particularly with turkeys. And the last time I was on, I mentioned I worked with DNR. I started my career with DNR, and that was during the wild turkey restoration days back in the mid '90s, this late '80s, '90s that we were talking about with restoration and trapping wild turkeys and moving them around in the state and a little bit of out of state. And like you had mentioned, I remember turkey hunting during those times, and it was multiple turkeys. I mean, you could go and hear several birds here and several birds there, or you looked at one another that morning and go, "All right, which one are we going to?"
Right.
And if you remember that, and John, I know you're up north, but it was just like that. It was so much fun, and you probably remember in the mid '80s that we had a fall season for turkeys,
Yeah, we did.
and we had a fall season. I think you remember in South Carolina, we had a 2 week break during the deer season. So that was where SCDNR worked that in to be safe. So the deer hunters and the turkeys hunters out there. Well, after a couple of years, they stopped that. And I remember you could ride around even during my days of DNR and early '90s up until we get into this time slot where we see things starting to go down. You could ride down the road and look in a field, and there would be maybe 30 in the fall, or over here you would see gobblers strutting with about 10 or 15 hens, and you just don't see that anymore.
Not at all.
And going back to, I'll reflect, and I know Pete, you and I talked a little bit about this past turkey season. This year, it was different for me. I think I hunted 27 days out of our 33-day season, or what, 30-day season, or whatever it was. Out of the 27, I heard turkeys 24 of those days. Now, what does that mean for me? There were several pieces of property that I went to, might hear one, didn't hear a whole lot. So this decline that I've seen throughout my career as being in this, it's really probably started around, I would say, early 2000. I think that a lot of what they're determining, there was Dr. Chamberlain has put out so much information. If you have the opportunity to go and listen to some of the podcasts he's talked about in the Southeast, we kind of came out of the 90s and we made a little bit of a decline, and then we dropped back down, and what's causing that decline and why are we seeing that? And I think I told you guys I managed a 2,000-acre tract up near Saluda Johnson. Pete,
Yep.
you mentioned Red back up there, and that really, to me, is where I started to contemplate, what am I doing wrong? What is the problem here? Why do I not have the birds I used to? Because used to I could go there and kill multiple turkeys. I remember in northern Saluda County, up near the river, another biologist friend of mine, we talk about it often, and he said, I remember that morning I went with you up on the Saluda River and we heard 11 turkeys gobbling that morning. It's some mornings you're just holding your breath now, hoping you'll hear one.
One, not multiple. One. Yeah.
One.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. It's just you're going, gosh, just please let me hear one this morning. Going back to my season this year, one thing that I noticed was that I might hear one turkey, but does that turkey want to play the game? It wasn't a real successful season for me because with my job and what I do, I hunt with a lot of people and a lot of first timers, and you're hoping that they hear a gobble of a turkey. You kind of see, if you're out there hunting them every day, you see how they react throughout the season. I had a year of misses. What else happened? Oh, the turkey's in range, but something blocks the shot. Somebody moves at the last minute. And, throughout my career, it wouldn't be uncommon, even during my days at NWTF, where this came into play, what was going on. And while I was there, what was the problem? And being around, everyone there and going to convention and listen to the research that was starting up and being done, what is the problem? So it was like this huge question mark. And, you guys, y'all turkey hunt. Pete, you hunt here too. What were some of the things you've said? I remember you telling me, man, I had turkeys here and they're just not there anymore.
Not there anymore. Yeah.
So
What I've seen, let me
go ahead.
I mean, because I trap predators pretty hard, a lot harder than most people do, the nest predators, the coons and possums and things of that. And I thought that would help, right? When I had the most turkeys is when I had mature pine trees on the property, and we went through a multi-year series of clear cuts, replantings, thinking that would even help because now we have better nesting areas. We have better areas for recruitment and things of that nature. I think it may have hurt some. I don't know, because it all happened about the same time. I think it's coincidence, but from the early 2000s, when I could go out and hear 7-8 turkeys gobble on a 400-acre tract, and now there's none, zero. And we would only kill 1 or 2 a year off that property because it's not a very big property. So I really don't know what it, because I thought I was doing everything right. I thought I was, removing nest predators, creating better nesting grounds for them, and yet they still declined. So I'm at a complete loss on it.
One of the things that I go back and look at is back during the trapping days that we were still doing Target 2000 with my career, is it was nothing to go and find flocks of birds, particularly what we needed to trap to move. And that a lot of the times, and you're going to, there are probably people who hear this goes, what? We would have landowners, private landowners, and we did a little bit on public land too, but private landowners would call us and say, hey, I got way too many hens on my property. I'll let you come trap the hens, but you can't take the gobblers. Well, you start taking the hens away, those gobblers are going to go somewhere else to find hens.
Yeah.
So, we had to kind of balance what we did when we trapped, but it wasn't hard to go find birds and set up and put the nets out and trap. And again, that kind of came to a halt in South Carolina, the latter part of 2000. And one of the things, people listening, and one of the things that I've heard, when you go to convention or you're around a lot of landowners is, you know, people start pointing fingers at trying to figure out what the reason is. They're going to point the finger at DNR. Well, you had a 5-day limit and you're burning during, nesting season, which that I'm not going to get into that because that's a lot of the public land is through U.S. Forest Service, and they have a different way of doing things. And people started pointing the finger. This is why we don't have them. This is this. But there again, if you love wild turkeys and you want to make sure that they're thriving and that you're going to have a population later on for new generations to hunt and for us to enjoy it, you've got to start thinking about, okay, what can I do? You've mentioned 400 acres. I remember a 50-acre tract that I could hunt back then, plenty of turkeys on, it was crazy how many 50 acres held. And somebody told me with the place that I managed there in outside of Johnston, it's like, you ought to have a turkey behind every tree. Well, I don't, I've seen that drop since 2020. And luckily this year I did see a little bit of an increase. So I had an opportunity this year to hunt with Patrick Whiteman. Patrick is one of the guys that's over research right now with Dr. Chamberlain. He's doing some things here in South Carolina, and got to really know Patrick a few years back where I invited him over to do a landowner event for SCWP. We were doing landowner events, and I wanted, those days were for landowners to get professional knowledge from experts in the field of whatever it may be. So I asked Patrick to come over and do a landowner event for us and just talk a little bit about wild turkey habitat. Well, I learned a lot that day, I've done this for a long, long time. And he's basing it on the research. And now you asked me when we started to see this decline, Pete, what was around 04, 5, 6, right in there, because there was some research showed that it peaked. We kind of peaked back out. Goblin got a little bit better, then we dropped back off. Was that because of the weather type, like this heat and drought? What effects did that have? The rain and the cold. But that was about the time, wasn't that about the time we started to see a fall in it? Around about 8, 5, 6, somewhere in that time.
Yeah.
And that's where you really started to see this research ramp up, and particularly in the Southeast, because the numbers, I hunted in Georgia and you wouldn't see that. I had the opportunity the past couple of years to hunt at Savannah River site with those special hunts down there, where there's some research going on down there now where you just didn't hear the birds that I would have heard 6 years ago.
Right.
So when Patrick was here and I asked him, I said, I know this is a broad subject, but just talk about what the research you guys have been doing that the everyday landowner, all of us as turkey enthusiasts and hunters, can do to make it, to help with this process of getting turkeys back to where it was. The one thing that he mentioned was habitat. What does your habitat look like? No matter if it's 2,000 or 50 or 30 acres, what does your property look like? And there's a large scale to, what goes on with habitat management. And that was one of the things he brought up was, are you managing your habitat to provide the needs that these turkeys need to survive and to make it from a poult to adulthood? You mentioned trapping, and there was so many things that go into habitat management. That was really a really hot topic. And we toured the property we were at, and he made note of things that were out there that you saw people making notes of. So Patrick came back and hunted with me for 3 days in South Carolina this year. And we would hunt in the mornings, and then he loved going around, and we looked at my property. We had several landowners that we rode around and looked at the property, and he pointed out things that he saw. Again, the research that's going on now is so important that Dr. Chamberlain and all these researchers from all these universities and these grad students are putting the time and effort out that they are using to come back and say, here's what needs to happen, or here's what we're seeing, or things that need to be done. And I think that's the key thing for people to understand right now is listen to what they're telling us. And, they are just providing the information that they are obtaining through this of the turkeys themselves and what they're living in, how they're reacting. And, I think that's so important that to people today is having the knowledge that the information these guys are putting out,
Yeah.
and as to what the next steps is they need to do to better their habitat.
Yeah. And so sitting here listening to, you guys both from the South, you shared that there was a time when you could get 5 gobblers. And I'd be curious when that changed. They said you can't shoot 5 anymore versus where the decline was. Do you think over hunting ever played a role in that? Or do you think it's more or a piece to that puzzle? I'm just curious what your thoughts are on it.
Pete, what was it? I think we started to see the limit changes because there was a lot of argument about
In 17 is when they reduced if my
Okay.
memory is right. In
yeah,
17
17
is
is when
reduced.
we reduced to
Yeah.
3, and then we went to 2, and then now, of course, no jakes. With what you're saying there, I think that's regulating the harvest was a step one for a lot of it, because were the birds there? And one thing we've got to think about, I think the key thing is reproduction. Are we replenishing what we're taking out?
Mhm.
Right.
And one of the things that, since we do these hunts at SCWP, even back to NWTF in those days, is kind of inventory and properties now, particularly, and that was to say, all right, we've got X amount on there, we have this many, we're only going to take this many. And I think what was happening was people, I don't want to start an argument or upset people. If people would just enjoy the moment and think towards turkey hunting as the gobble, hearing the gobble and the interaction, and it's all right, I've got 2 tags, I got to go fill every one of them, or it's how many you harvest in a year. I think we've got to get that mindset away from us, is to enjoying the moment of being out there. Now, all of us, have done it. The younger generation, if we as the older generation would teach this to the younger generation, multiple. I remember in South Carolina, one of the issues was that we were hunting birds in March before the hatch. Now, this is a lot of this research now as to when seasons should come in is based on incubation. When is peak incubation? And across the Southeast, it's pretty much the same. The bell curves that I've seen and listened to through the research is normally around April the 10th through the 15th, somewhere right in there. That's when most of your hens have initiated a nest and going to try to go and sit. You've got to think about the hen herself. Once she starts this breeding sequence with a gobbler, and there's so much out there. That's what I'm saying. I would really push your listeners and all of us to go listen to how the research has shown, where she goes to the gobbler and she's bred. She goes lays her egg each day, and then once she's through laying, she's going to sit. And with that, throughout the Southeast, is basically around the 10th through the 15th of April. So that's why you see the shift in the season. What we were doing, and you think about this with the harvest, is a lot of times we were hunting gobblers that, were in groups, and, you could kill 2 in a day, and we're out there when they're trying to get these hens bred, and there's going to be argument about, well, it's over. They started back in February and the season's over when it gets here and they quit gobbling. But we can talk about that in a minute. But the thing is that these birds weren't getting the hens bred. They needed to make sure things were happening before they went to the nest.
Yep.
And I can remember when we had that early season in March, you're working turkeys, and here comes a group of 3 or 4 in, and they're up there jockeying, and things have shown that usually the strutter is the more dominant turkey in the bunch, and that's what everybody shoots. Well, then these other, what I call the satellite gobblers, have to go back and do a pecking order to get back to who's going to be the boss, the main breeder.
Right.
There was some things shown that said, well, you got all these jakes that are breeding gobblers, and one thing that I was listening to Dr. Chamberlain talking about it. They're just not sexually mature to do it.
Right.
So, you can scratch that idea. So we were taking out gobblers before they could get things done, so these hens could get to the nest. I think that's probably hurt us over the years. But again, it goes back to, are we replenishing And I think
Right.
that's where the question mark is, because I remember doing poult counts in the 90s and in the 2000s where, from July through August, wherever I rode when I worked with DNR, and even past it, I still do it now. I'm still part of that, is recording how many hens, how many poults, how many gobblers. And you would I remember filling up sheets back in the day, and now I might have 3 entries on it.
Yeah.
So harvest,
Yeah.
we've got to keep in mind, it's not about, I would just encourage people, it's not about how many you kill, it's about the experience. If I were lucky enough here in South Carolina, 1 bird would do me. I'd be happy and watch somebody else do it.
Well,
That doesn't mean I wouldn't keep going. I'm just, because it's about the experience, as you said. It's not about punching the tag. John, go ahead.
well, I think two things with that. One, there's definitely a misconception on any hunt. Like what makes a successful hunt, right? Successful hunt is getting out there and just seeing the creation, seeing God's creation. I mean, it's a win. If I can come home with seeing a bunch of critters, I'm a happy man.
Oh yeah.
Now the second thing is, so we moved into our home in 2008. We're out in the country, and there's a field right near the edge of our town. When I first moved in, I would regularly see 30, 40 turkeys out in that field. Now, if I see 3, it's a lot. There's another field down around the corner, same deal. I used to see 3 big strutters, and a bunch of hens off the road. I know a guy that hunts that property, and I'm always pumping him for info. And he's like, I saw 1 turkey this year, whole year on that property. And it really is, it's really a shame. But I know up here, like, we have obliterated, other like upland birds due to probably lack of management and predators as well, that and everybody seems baffled.
Right.
So what can the regular hunter do? Let's say there's a guy that's going to public land or whatever versus someone that actually manages property. What do they do? I mean, what can they do to help the process? I mean, is there something they can do, or are they just kind of,
I think the public land hunter, and if I went back and looked at harvest numbers, because back when I was with DNR in the areas I worked in, we had a lot of turkey hunters in that area, and they basically would ask me, where Chief of Field was or whatever it was I was doing. But I think the public hunter needs to just get involved and remember that it is about the experience out there, and it's not how many, and respecting other hunters. If they come to an area and other hunters they're hunting, that respect. As far as getting involved with the habitat part, I think they can support, projects or things that are going on in those areas to help support it. And, we used to have volunteer days that people could come out and volunteer and do things. And it's kind of hard because public land is regulated either through South Carolina, and now anymore, it's not through the paper companies, it's through the U.S. Forest Service. And that might vary from state to state. I think in some situations here in South Carolina and throughout the South, we noticed that there's more in certain pockets, there are adequate numbers of turkeys right now. And one of the things that we've talked about more towards the low country, you start to get into that Francis Marion area. And, going back to the burning, I know that is a sore subject down there when they do a lot of these 1,000, 2,000 acre burns down there in April and May, and during the nesting season when things can be crucial. And there again, I think when it comes to that, the Forest Service has reasons why they do that. It's really, any growing season burn is a time that you want to reduce hardwood competition, and it does benefit at a small scale to wild turkeys and that benefit. But they can go, and I think they're kind of voice their opinions in a positive manner, not causing a problem. And I think that's something they should do there. It's just public. I noticed this year that the public land the number of birds were further down on the total harvest than what private land is there. And there again, it depends on what management practice. I know there's a lot of burning. I know when I worked, we planted, and we again planted a lot of chufa at the time, and clover and things like that. I don't think they have the manpower, nor do they have the funds to go back to doing that type of work. And I think that's where the public can get involved to find ways to support that.
You're also, as a public land hunter, you're at the mercy of the public land management.
Pretty much.
Right. You are. And so like here, I live in Chesterfield. I'm right next to the Sand Hills National Wildlife Refuge. And in this area, pine straw for mulch and stuff, whatever that's called, baling pine straw is huge. They're going on the refuge now, and they're raking almost all the straw up. So they're burning all the underbrush, and they're raking all the straw up and disturbing all that. And the locals are telling me when the pine straw market started to skyrocket and they started going to the refuge and getting the straw, it really affected the turkeys. One of the things I want to in that is a lot of people are blaming coyotes. A lot of people are blaming the straw market. A lot of people are blaming this. I don't think, and I'm not a scientist, there's not one thing you can point to and say, this is what led to the decline.
Correct.
It is a multitude of things that happened over a long period of time, killing turkeys before they're able to breed the hens. Now, biologically, a hen can store the sperm, and one breeding cycle can fertilize multiple eggs because she can only lay one a day. But it still has to be bred multiple times to get to her 14 average egg clutch. But if we're taking the mature turkeys out by killing them too early, because as you said, jakes are not sexually mature, so they can't breed. They can try,
right?
Emotions, but they're shooting blanks, for lack of a better phrase.
Pretty much, yes.
So when you take all the mature turkeys out, and that's a 2-year-old and over, before they can breed, your habitat has been decimated because of a lot of different reasons. And you add predators, nest predators, and other predators into the mix. You got a lot of things going on that's hurting.
Yeah. Well, and good luck convincing a lot of hunters to let a nice animal walk.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it took me a lot of years before I started letting bucks walk.
Still not there.
Yeah. Well, some people never get there, it's okay.
and that, like you just said, I think when it comes to hunting, especially any game, it's ethics, your ethical ethics, how you approach things and do things. If we could sometimes get that out of our mind, that it's all about how many tags we fill, particularly with turkeys, is something that we can, if I can go and share the experience with somebody who's never done it, or I would love to be able to do that. I know at one point during the NWTF days, of course the R3 movement was to recruit more hunters. Well, the turkey hunting public was not very happy with that. The resources, and I've heard this argument and I've listened to podcasts about it. We've got a low population to hunt, but you want to bring more hunters in to hunt them. And I understand that, but also understand that hunters pay for conservation also through the guns and their license and help with research. And that's something that I think from a hunter standpoint, if you're a public land hunter or a private hunter, is how we go about this. It's about the resource that we need to be concentrating on, not more so how many pictures we can post on social media and how many tags we can do. So what can we do? What is it to do? These drastic drops it's a lot of different variables. It's different things. It's not just one thing. It's not the coyote, as you were talking about, Pete. It's not coyotes. It's not because we shot so many. I think it's a list of things that this research is trying to find. And spending time with Patrick, I had a lot of opportunity to ask questions. And what can we do as hunters, as landowners? And that's how we manage our property. And one of the things you got to look at, what are the turkey's needs? We talk about the reproductive side, is looking at evaluating your property. Do I have nesting habitat? Do I have the brooding habitat that they need to come off of as soon as they get through nesting and go into that brooding area? One thing that I did learn is, and I was kind of thought I was right, but I wasn't until he told me, was most, and this is again, these birds with all these trackers on, 3,000 acres is basically the home range of a turkey. You know, when he does their thing, 3,000.
Wow.
So if you're hunting 400, Pete, he leaves your place and goes to the next spot, or my 2,000, and he jumps over to the 50 acres or 60 acres on the other side. You know, it's again, how's that habitat over there compared to what I'm breaking my neck to do over here? Is he going to survive when he goes there? So what I think the basic concept for landowners to look at to manage their property for turkeys is one, timber management. You keep talking about pine straw. That's a lot of things. That could be a variable that's happened. We're South Carolina, the Southeast, more northern states. It's about industrial pine. That's where things have changed since the 80s. We're more into this industrial pine. And of course, right now, the timber market is horrible. It's just not moving like it should. We've changed the way we plant the pine trees. We've done away with a lot of hardwoods. You go back to look at how farming's done in the upstate in a lot of places. Used to, farmers would leave, a little bit of an edge to a field, or leave the old fence rows and things. You don't see that. It's about production, and that way the habitat is kind of dwindling away.
Yeah.
So,
I noticed that just the other day. I was driving through Chesterfield County, and there's a very large farmer here, and he plants right to the edge of the ditch of the right of way and right to the edge of the trees. I mean, every last row is planted. And as you said, I remember when they would leave 15, 20 feet around the field, and 15, 20 feet around an entire field is a lot of ground that supports quail, turkeys, rabbits, all these small game. They need that for these small seeds, and especially a poult can't eat a wheat seed. It's too big, right? They need the small seeds.
And when it comes to poults, it's, I think I wrote an article of the Turkey Caller at one point. I said it becomes a fact that you're bug farming. You're trying to create habitat for these young poults this time of year that need protein and need these insects. And one thing that I learned the other day through a podcast, and maybe one of the Gamekeeper podcasts, is that people don't see the insects, don't see the grasshoppers like we used to.
Not at all.
And there again, it's about how you produce the right pollinator habitats, early successional habitat that produce this brooding area. One thing that Patrick and I did talk about a little bit was, connectivity between properties. Are the birds able to travel from one place to the other? Are they able to obtain the needs they need along the way? Is there a coyote waiting on them? And talking about trapping, well, we had an opportunity to go and look at my place there, and I wanted to find out, when somebody comes out and says, man, this is gorgeous, there'll be turkeys everywhere, and not saying, I still learn things, and there are there's guys throughout the South that are great land managers, but they're still running into the same, and I'm scratching my head going, okay, what am I doing? I'll give you this scenario basically I think a lot of landowners and a lot of us have run into. So back in probably 2019 to 2018 on this property, we heard multiple birds gobbling. We would see multiple birds during the fall, and we had an opportunity to hunt, and we would decide based on the gobbling activity and sightings as to how many birds we were going to take. Well, then in one swoop there and I'll get back to what Patrick was allowing to the harvesting. This goes back to hunting birds. Is we took 3 birds off of there in 1 week and stopped, but we heard other gobbling going on. So after that was done, the next year, I think around 2020, it was COVID. After COVID, the next thing I know, we're not hearing turkeys over there. My neighbors might be hearing turkeys. Wasn't hearing the birds. And I thought, wow, one season just didn't make that big of an impact. Well, the next year, I think maybe my son may have killed one, and we just weren't hearing them. And then after that, it was like dead silence over there in April. Nothing. Well, hear any bird. I wasn't seeing any hens. I wasn't seeing any poult. Was seeing a few poults here and there, but very little ones. It's like things just kind of went silent, and then we weren't seeing them. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, what do I need to do different? Do I need to burn different to create this brooding habitat? Do I need to trap more? I had trappers coming, but they'd be there for a short time. So then I started learning later on. I decided, okay, well, this past year, last year, and one before, we weren't going to hunt them. We were going to let them come back. Well, then I learned that when I'm not hunting them, my neighbors were hunting them, and I might have had one or two gobblers. They shot those gobblers. So all that is a setback to what was happening. So I started this past January. I think Pete, you and I were talking about a little bit about it. I started trapping for myself. I got a permit. I started going after nest predators. I started doing it myself. So, all right, let's start going in and working to see what I can do to make a difference. Even though my place looks really good, but I don't hear the birds. We saw more turkeys this year. We saw more turkeys in the fall. So I started trapping. I ran into my neighbor one day, and he wanted me to look at a clear cut that he had and give him ideas as to what to do. So we started a discussion that day about not seeing birds, and I was seeing some gobblers and hearing a couple this year, and we both made a decision. He's not going to hunt them. I'm not going to hunt them, just to help it out. So we started kind of flowing this discussion, and he was asking me what he could do. Well, while Patrick was there and we started talking about why my numbers look low, and I told him the back history, he said, there you go. This goes back to the harvest. He said, you killed this many gobblers back in 2020, adult gobblers. Then your neighbor killed one. Then this killed. There's nothing here. You don't, if the numbers or if reproduction is not good, wasn't seeing hens. And one of the things that concerned him was I was seeing birds this year on camera. Point being, there'd be like 8 or 9 hens in a group, 6 hens in a group. Here's the point. Based on research that he told me, he said, Travis, only 2 of those hens are probably going to go nest. Let's just say out of 8, 2. 1 is the only one that's going to be successful. And evaluating the property, he looked at what I was doing, looked at what I just recently burned, looked at some areas that I had did some early successional burning or disking and the differences and what it was creating. And no matter what I'd burn, one of the things he brought back, we go back to timber. He said, if you can thin more and open this up, this is going to get more sunlight to the ground and burning at different times of the year, not only early March, but burning back in January, burning in early March, waiting right. We did burn an area in May because I showed it to him. And this will tell people about growing season burns during the nesting season. He said, we looked at it and it had sweet gum and it was 6-7 foot tall. He said, Travis, a hen's not going to be in there nesting. He said, now is the time to get rid of it. If she is, she's 5 foot off this fire break. She's not going in there. So we burned that. So I'm trying to stagger my burning, but I'd love to open up the timber and thin it a little bit more to make it more bug friendly, I'll call it, and more early successional and things like that. So it was looking and evaluating what I had done on mine and what I could do better. One key thing is, he said, is having this connectivity through your timber management. So if you're burning one spot, patchwork burning, burn one. Is she able to walk off of that that I burned last year and nested? And we just put out a video on Mossy Oak Go, if somebody's interested, on burning disturbance through fire. And we talked about this in there through our SCWP Enrich the Habitat, Encourage the Hunt show or video series. And is she able to go to that, walk off the nest and go there? If she has to travel 500 yards and get her brood to another spot, most likely they're not going to make it. Something's going to be better than that. But my neighbor is trapped. I found out too, he is trapping, I'm trapping. So we're both on the spot on about how we trap. He's trapping coons, I'm catching coons, whatever I can catch, using my permit from now till I can get my trapper back. So we kind of started building this little bit of a bond about what we wanted to do. And then I took him to another landowner that was close by. His problem was he wasn't burning regularly. He wasn't mowing and creating that brooding habitat that was needed. So my point, I guess what I'm trying to get at is not only what you do on your property, what is your neighbors doing on their property?
Mhm.
These 3,000 acres, what's going on there? And what we're learning is the habitat management, it can't be a predator haven, such as thick, not burn, gnarly. Like, it's deer going to benefit from it no matter what you do. We'll have plenty of deer. So it was talking about how people burn, how they thin their timber. Somebody's gonna say, well, you're planting chiles and clovers. That's just a minute thing, and that's just added. But how you are working that landscape from a burning standpoint, do you need to do herbicide work? These early successional areas, whether it's a logging deck that you might go in and harrow up, which I have found, and we both looked at it, where I go and harrow in July, the next spring, it comes back in growth of various type height. Poults need height levels one for insects are on at different heights, down to the ground, up to high, but it also gives them a little bit of cover to hide in what they do. I harrowed up some stuff last year in July where I think I had a chupa patch. Well, it came back in goldenrod, came back in a little bit of blue stem, brown-eyed Susans in another field, which are all great pollinator areas for turkeys. So we started talking about that and the things that we were doing. Well, what if my landowner next to me, or what if here's another variable, what if it's a hunting club?
Yeah.
A lease that they can't do a lot. Well, then maybe there's time to talk to some of these timber companies about maybe their practices. But again, it goes back to that industrial loss of habitat. Is that what has made this decline? And one of the things that a question that always comes up, you guys, is the corn issues. When we started putting out a lot more corn, turkeys started to not see those numbers. And again, there's debate out there now about aflatoxins and what corn produces, from that standpoint, disease standpoint, the avian flu issue is always out there. I think my issue and my point today, telling people if you've got property you can manage, I think you do what you can on there to make it suitable for turkeys to live on and make it through their career. Their lifespan from this to what we want to see. I think everybody can do a little bit of something. I don't care if it's 25 acres. If you plan to do something that a turkey's going to travel within that 3,000 acres lifespan, I think you can make a huge difference.
You mentioned, I was going to ask this question. You just mentioned it's just a great segue of the avian flu. Now, one of the things, as a USDA guy, we see this a lot in production houses, chicken, turkey houses. We see the avian flu in certain pockets of the country. There'll be an outbreak and we have to go mitigate that. But because I've never seen a dead turkey in the woods naturally, I've seen evidence of a dead turkey, where a predator got in, you got this big feather pile and all that kind of stuff. But as far as finding a dead turkey, so they can do testing on it to find, did the avian flu get to this flock or what? I don't know that there's any research out there on that.
Mm-mm.
But you'd have to think, since it's an airborne disease, if there's a turkey house close by, production turkey house, that the flu gets into, it would have to, by air, get to the local turkeys in the area and spread. At least you would think that. But the avian flu is not turkey specific, it's all birds. So you would see a mass die off of starlings and crows and everything else if it really got out there. So I've often wondered, has the avian flu been a factor in the wild turkey population? And I don't know if there's any research out there to it.
I think there's been some things that are being looked into. I don't want to speak on, what my opinion would be. I think that's just another one of those factors that has to be looked at. What that has done. I've had, again, in waterfowl, it's been mentioned in waterfowl too. It's so there again. I think there's some things going on. I wish I knew a little bit more about it. From my days of the DNR, and as you said, being in the woods, how many turkeys have I found just falling over dead? Or back during my DNR days, I only experienced 2 turkeys that I saw that had what's called avian pox, the blackhead,
Yeah.
and had to catch that bird, take her to University of Georgia to Squidus, where the Southeastern Disease Study place is, had that taken care of. And again, I think that's a factor there that's probably being looked at more and more each day, just because we need to find what each little factor. And I think they're looking into that a little bit more time and time again. You know, it goes back to what I mentioned about aflatoxins and corn. You know, what factor that plays. The main point is that they are looking into every possible thing that could have caused a decline. And as I said, you're right. It's just like CWD. You know, there again, somebody's going to point the finger here and here, and you just mentioned a coyote. They're going to point a finger there, and again, I think those, as hunters and landowners and turkey enthusiasts, it's important to us to go and listen and read and find out what the research is going on. That way, we have a better understanding as to what may be the problem. You know, if we don't go and listen or read and adhere to what these guys are doing, we draw our own conclusions.
Right.
And I think we shouldn't be drawing conclusions until we know fact. And that's what they are trying to present to us.
Well, I think that's a great point, because really, if we are to be wise stewards, right, we need to listen to the wise voices, right?
That's right.
So my question, Travis, you've cited a ton of like different stuff, right? Like, these guys are researching this, these guys are researching this. It might be this. Is there a study, a larger study that's helping to compile that, you know, and say, here's out of the 30 issues we have, here's what the experts are saying are the top 10 issues. Here's the top 4 things the average, let's say, landowner, 20-acre landowner, you know, that's all he's ever going to own, 30-acre landowner. Here's some the best practices that are attached to this greater study. Because the sad truth is, I fear a lot of people won't do what you just said.
Right.
They won't read the research. They do want the cheat sheet. So I'm just curious if there's something that's put out, let's say, for the average guy that's not going to read the actual research, but hey, if they're told that the best practice is to have more turkeys, and it's, whittled down to 5 or 10, we might actually have a chance of making a headway. Now, I would love to read the research myself. I like that kind of stuff, but I don't know that everybody does. That's my concern, So,
so this is a good lead into what I just launched or put together.
Yeah.
And, I had to go back and think about my days as working with DNR, and one of the things you learned in order to, what I was told in one of my wildlife classes in college, you can't, like you and I can meet my own needs, but I can't meet every turkey's needs in the woods. Right. So there are landowners that I think are not real sure, will they do it or not? That's just, that's a question that I wish I could answer totally, but I think that's where you educate. It's about educating that person. It's just like with hunting or anything you do. They need to be educated as to what the need and what they want to see. For us that love turkey hunting and love to hear the bird gobble, and more so for me today, I'm so passionate about creating better habitat for not just turkeys, everything, and seeing the results. So when I'm out there on a tractor or riding on my Ranger and I see a group of turkeys go across the road, or even I've been so excited now because I've seen more birds this year. This was the year of the Jake, if you don't believe it. Everybody's saying because we had all the cicadas, that may be a big factor because there was plenty of insects and poults survived. One thing that I get excited about is that. So what I started thinking about my situation on my property, and then I started talking to my landowners, was what if we start, and this goes to your point of the landowner not sure what to do. What if we started building cooperatives between landowners, a landowner cooperative, basically made up of a group of landowners or people who are passionate about turkeys, enthusiastic about turkeys, and not just turkeys, all their wildlife on there. So centralizing properties together that surround each other so everybody could work together to manage the same. Now, not all properties are the same. Not all practices are going to be the same. But within that cooperative of landowners, you would have a group that could assist another landowner to get things done, that say, hey, maybe burning is a big thing. Nope, I'm not burning a thing over here. Well, what I hope to be able to do through our organization is provide a list of contractors that could go and help burn this piece of property for this person. Or if they need timber management done, I could put them in touch, or one of these other people within the cooperative could put that person in touch with a timber manager. How to create better early successional habitat on their property. Do they need help trapping? All these different practices, because when it comes to turkeys, it's about timber management. I believe that your fire regime, do you have early successional habitat on your property? Are you trapping? And then also, are you providing the water, the needs, the space that they need to be able to survive? And within a cooperative, what you're doing is you're building connectivity of properties. You're also building kind of the landscape across the landscape, basically the same pattern of practices that are going on. So within the cooperative, you're able to help a landowner that might not know what to do or where to find that person. And you talk to one another and you share. First thing is you share that information about what you look and evaluate the properties. Two, it's building a good relationship with your adjacent landowners from the aspect of safety for their property, trespassing. And it's also it's a time to earn a little trust. Now, the hard side of this too, that would be hard, is you're able to collect observation data within those properties, and you share with one another that like my landowner and I did, we knew there was only one gobbler, so we decided not to hunt it. You're able to share that information within that cooperative, and you're able to make decisions on how we hunt. Do we hunt? That way you're helping the resource and you're managing to help build populations back up within that property. But I think going to your point is you've got avid people within that cooperative that would be dedicated to help that individual, help him meet his needs that needs to be done. Yeah. And again, this is the first time I've mentioned it. I just finished the outline. I'll be glad. I should have shared it with you guys before today. I just put that together. It's gone out to get some feedback. But what I hope to do is to start working with landowners that want to form these cooperatives. And then we're all working together to at least better the habitat part, which seems to be the number one issue that I hear from research and hear from the researchers, is how we manage the property. Does it meet the needs of the turkey?
So these would be wildlife management cooperatives.
It'll be basically what I'll call a wild turkey landowner cooperative. QDMA put out one. They've done it with deer cooperatives on deer management. Well, if this the old story. Well, if this 2.5-year-old 8-point walks over to my neighbor's, he's dead. That kind of thing, he's gonna get shot. Was that they built a cooperative and they've done successful, but this turkey cooperative is a little bit different. It's based more on habitat management, and it does have some basis between how birds are hunted too. Because I'm taking it from the example of my property where I thought I was doing everything, but where my neighbors was that turkey leaving my property, was he going to make it? But then I find out I'm letting birds go, but they're getting shot. It's working together to kind of help establish better numbers like we used to hear. And I think that's what it's going to, as landowners and hunters, if we don't work together to do what we can for whatever little bit of property we've got, and that connectivity that based on what I've just told you, she goes 500, she ain't going to make it. If she goes within 3,000 acres, and they see gobblers go 2.5 miles in a day making the loop. So we've got this off the ground, and we can talk, with your listeners or people that might be interested can reach out to me that would like to hear more on how to form a cooperative. It doesn't work within. I've got an outline. I'll have more information to put out, but hopefully, it goes back to how you manage your property right now as to how we're going to better it for turkeys down the road.
That's awesome.
Somebody may go, hey, I got plenty of birds, and they'll say, well, I'm feeding them year round. Okay, that's great. But what about your neighbor? And again, it goes back to the hunting side of things, guys, is that we've got to be willing not to think about we're going to tag out. Well, if I tell my landowner I've got a bird gobbling over here and I'm not going to tell him I've got it, it's just that one. That doesn't necessarily mean there might be multiple other birds there, but you're able to pass that on. Like I'm thankful my landowner, I sat there and talked about it, and he said, well, if you're not hunting them, I'm not hunting. He said, I've done hunted enough of them. I'd rather see my grandchildren. And that's my point too. With a grandson on the way, I want in 6 years to be able to take him out there and watch him kill his first turkey.
Right. Travis, all good information, man. It really is really good information. And just to kind of pull this together, as we said a couple of times in the show, is you can't point to any one thing that's caused it. But if the future of the wild turkey is important to you, as it should be to all hunters, whether you're a turkey hunter or not, then there is something we can do to help them to replenish or to come back, for lack of a better phrase, to where they once were, or even beyond that. And we all, as outdoorsmen and lover of nature, should want to do whatever we can in order to help that happen.
Yeah.
And I'll put in the show notes how they can get a hold of you.
Right.
And
I would just emphasize, I know I threw a lot of information, and there it is a lot. I think to sum this up when it comes to turkeys and we as turkey lovers is, one, go out there and listen to the research. And the more I listen to it, the more it flips things in my mind. Hey, I probably need to be doing this. Listen to the research, because that's what they're there for. They're to provide that to us as knowledge as to what is going on. And then two, evaluate what you're doing on your property and what can I do better to make it better, even if it's 20 acres, if I just left an edge or something. And I think that's the things we can do. And two, ethics. What are your be ethical hunters, and it's not about tagging. It's about the gobble. It's about the experience of being out there.
Yeah,
it is.
And I think there's a lot of I know we're getting towards the end here. I think there's a lot of spiritual parallels there. Right?
Oh, there is.
You talk about leaning on others to kind of help get your place up to the standard, right? I mean, how important, right? Scripture talks about that, right? Bear one another's burdens in the Lord. You talk about, listening to the research. There's older, wiser men that I lean on regularly and say, hey, help, I don't know what to do. So I think, and that's what I love about the outdoors. You look at the beauty of God's creation. I think there's a ton of spiritual application that we can make with that stuff as well.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree. I think the point to take away from this is, in my eyes, and when it comes spiritually, is, those poor turkeys are they struggle to survive every day, and so do we. But like you just mentioned, it's like you guys, and I have other friends of mine that anytime I need spiritual guidance, and I can go to them and, ask a question, and we can talk together to resolve a problem. And I think in this day and time, we really need to be looking at that, is to have good spiritual Christian friends or accountability people that you can go and talk to, and let God lead you to that. And I'm so thankful for that every day. It's to have that people that I can go to find out the things I need, particularly if I'm having a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Amen.
absolutely.
Amen.
And it's that iron sharpens iron.
Yeah. And I think some days too, you talk about all these best practices, just do what you can.
That's right.
You know, just do what you can. Right.
Yeah.
I think we overwhelm people sometimes, and you know,
And
do
there's
you-
all kinds of professional help with that,
Oh,
you know, that you
100%.
can reach out to.
Yeah,
And
there is.
100%. Are we talking about turkeys or the soul? What are we talking about?
both.
Both.
So,
Travis Sumner, thank you again for joining us here on Christian Outdoors.
yes,
buddy.
thank you.
Absolutely. Been a pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Yes, sir.